Welcome to Bitola, the second largest Macedonian city, for this new edition of Europe Districts, our European program on EU enlargement. The former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia was given candidate status in 2005, but since then progress has been alarmingly slow, partly because of a long-standing dispute with Greece over the name of this country. But as our reporter finds out, there is another issue. Brussels is increasingly worried about freedom of speech in the country. But one thing is sure, Macedonians remain overwhelmingly in favor of EU membership, and they will tell us why. In this program we'll also meet Grigor Cemerski, one of the region's most prolific painters, and Vladimir Franz, a young rock musician, will show you the many faces of the capital, Skopje. But let's start with our first report. Earlier this year, the country saw the worst wave of ethnic violence in more than a decade. Alix Le Bourdon finds out why Slav Macedonians and ethnic Albanians remain at loggerheads 11 years after the country nearly avoided a civil war.
It was on this street, on the outskirts of Gostova, that the tragedy took place. On the 28th of February, a policeman of Macedonian origin killed 2 young ethnic Albanians. Those close to the victims are still coming to terms with what happened.
The policeman emptied his gun, he fired 15 bullets and threatened anyone who tried to stop him.
One of the victims was only 26 years old. He got caught up in a simple dispute over parking places. Along with grief, his family are overcome by a deep sense of injustice.
Anywhere else in the world, you'd never see a policeman kill 2 people for nothing. Here, ethnic Albanians are killed, and it's normal.
The deaths of these 2 young people have sparked a wave of inter-ethnic violence throughout the country. For weeks, certain districts of Skopje were the scene of violent clashes. Slav Macedonians were the target. The reaction was instant. 2,000 people marched in the streets of the capital, part of a huge walk for peace. The tensions bring back haunting memories of 2001, when Albanian rebels clashed with the Macedonian army. The violence resulted in the Ohrid Agreement, which guaranteed ethnic Albanians fair access to public sector jobs and made Albanian the country's second official language. But this activist says divides remain.
The problem is that even after the Ohrid Agreement, tensions continue to mount, and I think it institutionalized divisions.
The country was granted candidate status for the EU in 2005, but since then talks have stalled. Brussels is losing patience as there's little sign of tensions easing, and EU officials in the capital are calling for calm.
Bearing in mind, of course, the rich history of this country and this region, then this ethnic component comes always into the play too. But I call here all the stakeholders not to use those incidents for political purposes.
In this tense situation, the Football League was suspended, but little by little, matches have resumed. We head to Tetovo, a largely Albanian city where a crucial game will take place. In the stadium, the mood between supporters is electric. The most ferocious match isn't played on the pitch, but rather in the stands. The Albanian side hurl ethnic insults targeted at their rivals.
We don't like them, we really don't like them, and we can make some troubles also. We are the best, and we are telling them. Yes!
It's the same scene on the Macedonian side of the stalls. The game itself seems to be the last thing on their minds.
There must be rivalry between groups of supporters to see who's the strongest, who's got the most members.
Every time a match between Shkendia and Tetex takes place, the organisers are on edge.
It's always really tense. It's a local derby. It's always been this way, and that's the way it will always be. Inter-ethnic tensions are felt in and outside the stands. We do everything we can to ensure security.
However, the players on both teams are mixed. And here, as Tetex players take part in their daily training, they say they coexist quite well.
The ambience here is excellent. We don't have any problems with Albanian players.
We're together. We're here to play football. Macedonian and Albanian. It doesn't make a difference.
The president of the club is proud of his team made up in equal parts of Slav Macedonians and ethnic Albanians. He still can't explain the hate between supporters.
Tetek supporters hurl racial abuse at their rivals, but they also insult players from their own team.
It's a rare example of understanding between the two ethnic groups in this small Balkan country still haunted by inter-ethnic tensions.
Well, for more on the story, I'm joined by the Macedonian Foreign Minister, NIKOLA. Mr. POPOSKI, thank you for having us. As we saw in our report, a new wave of violence erupted in your country in March between Slav Macedonians and ethnic Albanians. Does this mean that the peace agreement, which was signed back in 2001, has failed?
Incidents unfortunately happen. They can happen in member states of the European Union as well as in candidate or potential candidate countries. What really matters is the reaction of the institutions. I really believe that by the way that the institutions had reacted, not leaving any of the perpetrators not being sanctioned for any kind of violence that can be stimulated, is the only way that a rule of law can be the major point on which everybody insists. So I think that in that manner we can just limit the incidents to the level of incidents and not a phenomenon that can disturb the functioning of the democratic institutions. That's clearly not the case.
Your country was granted candidate status in 2005. Ever since, not much has happened. Brussels still hasn't given you a date to start accession talks. Why has progress been so slow?
It is a matter of fact that some 10, 11 years ago, when we were at the brink of a conflict, we have managed to overcome it thanks to the perspectives of joining NATO and EU within several years. We're one decade later and we still suffer from blockages on both ways. The fact that we were unable to step forward on both paths causes frustrations, obviously. We need to fight that and we need to make sure that both NATO and EU membership remain credible to the citizens.
Your neighbour Greece continues to block your EU bid because of a long-standing dispute over the name of your country. Is there any hope that a compromise will be found?
This issue has been created on the basis of a myth that was saying that independent Macedonia represents a threat to security and territorial integrity of Greece. No reasonable man these days will agree with that. If Greece would allow Macedonia to join NATO, it will only share borders with NATO member states. That is quite important element for Greece's comfort and security. If we focus on these files, the name issue should not be a relevant one in order to block our prospects of integration into both NATO and EU.
In its latest progress report, the European Union severely criticized your country regarding the state of press freedom. It says, I'm quoting, intimidation of journalists and selective enforcement of legislation against media companies are increasing causes for concern. Is there a problem regarding press freedom in your country?
I believe that there is space for improvement, and that is the kind of spirit in which we approach things. What is quite obvious as well is that we have a diversity of views, and that is the essential thing. In a country which has one of the highest internet penetration levels in European terms, I think that the freedom of expression is quite obvious in attaining it. What we will try to do, even in the coming period, is even to enhance that possibility to have a divergence of views. And I hope that the dialogue with the Association of Journalists will definitely contribute on that path.
NIKOLA POPOSKI, Macedonian Foreign Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Last year, the country's main opposition channel, as well as 3 newspapers, were closed down after their owner was jailed for financial crimes. The EU and NGOs have regarded the move as an attack against media freedom, but the government insists it merely applied the law.
The finance minister will speak at midday and the governor at 2 p.m.
This is still a novel experience. For just 3 weeks, Kole's been the editor of this news team. The news channel claims total freedom of expression, an editorial line that's difficult to implement in this small Balkan country.
In this country, journalism, it's at very low level. So here, when you have, for example, a story against the opposition, nobody calls them for their side of the story.
His colleagues mainly come from the now-defunct opposition channel A1, which was shut down last summer on orders from a court in Skopje. In March, the owner was sentenced to 13 years in prison on 4 charges, including tax evasion. The government denies any interference and insists the law was applied fairly. But for many former employees, it was the channel's anti-government stance that was the problem. The lawyer for the owner of the channel has returned to the A1 building.
At around 2 p.m., the police arrived and encircled the building.
In 24 years on the job, this leading barrister says he's never seen anything like it.
It's a huge disappointment, because the court is no longer a court. It's an execution commission, a commission that is probably following the orders of someone.
Former employees of the A1 channel fear what lies ahead for their new station. In 3 weeks, it's already causing quite a stir. Natasha knows that as a journalist there, she'll have more difficulties than employees at pro-government outlets.
During press conferences, it's like they don't want to talk to us. They prefer to speak to journalists that have previously been sent a list of pre-prepared questions.
In the capital, Skopje, other former A1 employees are waging war. In 10 days, they're planning to relaunch the channel on the web. It's a militant act for Predrag. The young journalist refused to apply for any other jobs at other channels.
We're sure they will attack us again with new controls, inspecting our finances. But we're not afraid. They won't find anything. Everything's in order. They'll create some new problem, but we'll carry on.
From the moment A1 was shut down, its employees took action. In a symbolic move, they began broadcasting in freezing temperatures from outside the government building. Heading up the protest was the channel's star presenter. We found her at her new employer's Kanal 5, a pro-government outlet. Today, she seems less willing to talk, preferring to hide behind her role as anchor.
I just present what the editor prepares. Of course, it would be very different if you were an investigative journalist. You do your work as best you can. Either you enjoy complete freedom, or you're subject to pressure from someone else.
Another cause for concern is a new law in the pipeline concerning the accreditation of foreign journalists, which states they must be accredited by the Foreign Ministry.
The first problem with this law is the power the Foreign Affairs Ministry has to give or not give journalists accreditation. The law presents this country as one that fears foreign journalists covering the news here.
But the Justice Minister says there's no ulterior motive.
We have followed EU guidelines, and in most other member states, press accreditation is provided by the Foreign Ministry. We already had rules in place concerning this issue, and we have simply adapted them.
According to Reporters Without Borders, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia ranks 94th of 179 countries in terms of press freedom.
He's one of the most prolific painters in the region. I want to introduce you to Gligor Chemersky. Hello.
Hello.
Now, Macedonians say that you've really managed to capture the soul of their country.
Since Macedonia has existed, like in all Mediterranean countries, painting has embodied the culture. Frescoes and icons belong to this great legacy. And here art has always served to express our joy about life. But it also expresses our extraordinary misfortunes. I was born in a valley near the ancient city of Stobi. There you get this feeling that satyrs from the past still mingle with boys playing near the river. Look, here's a young man who's in the middle of the vineyard. I feel that all of nature happens to him, goes through him.
We can see all your paintings around us, but your most famous work can be found in the city of Kočani, and it's a monumental mosaic.
I wanted to represent a Macedonian epic, our quest to liberate ourselves from our various invaders. It was in 1979 I gathered a large group of young artists, students of fine art, to carry out this gigantic work. We worked for 3 years. The result? A giant mosaic measuring 330 square meters.
Grzegorz Ciemerski, thank you very much. And thank you for watching the first part of Europe District. We'll return after the news break in about 10 minutes, so please stay with us.